stood up, I thought you were all leaving. So look, I can understand that if you were leaving because I was speaking, but don't forget, Miss Kay is going to be here in just a few minutes. You do not want to miss that.
That's right.
And so that's why they put me first, because they knew that you would stay to hear Kay. I would. By the way, I want to say what a pleasure to be here with Congressman Pittenger, Richard Hudson, Congressman from this area as well. And to all of you, thank you for coming out. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. There is one problem, though. Because of the way this is structured, you guys are going to miss my show on Fox tonight.
How they replay it.
Maybe we can just put it on, yeah. Hopefully you DVR it. If not, watch it tomorrow. And also want to say that it just seems appropriate, since I can't, do my show from Carolina, I could at least have a little fun with it. And you got a band over here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let me just say this. In Arkansas, they say the 5 most feared words of an Arkansas politician are these. Will the defendant please rise? And there's a good reason people say that. Is because there have been so many elected officials who ended up going from the Capitol to the big house. When they say you go into the big house, they don't mean necessarily that you're going to take public office. And when they talk about term limits, they mean how many sentences can you string consecutively together. So I can't think of a better thing to do. Guys, could we do Folsom Prison? Let's do that.
Oops.
So I'm lucky enough, this is my second time around with Governor Huckabee on stage. During the presidential election, we had Governor Huckabee on bass, and again, Senator Tim Scott, who's a wonderful senator, a dear friend, not the best singer. We played Hit the Road Rock, so I feel like we influenced that Newsweek cover. We played Hit the Road, it was Hit the Road Jack to Hit the Road Rock. So this is our second go around with the governor. And this guy is the real deal bass player. This guy can play. I think, he definitely knows what's going on here on the bass. The real deal. So Johnny Cash song, here we go. Give it up for Governor Huckabee.
Told me, son, always be a good boy. She said, play with guns, wash our man and we just watch you now. When I hear that lonesome whistle, I hang my head and cry. Hey! Those rich folks eating in that fancy dining car. in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame one day. Give it up one more time for the governor. Give it up one more time.
Well, that was fun, and thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Okay, so I'll take 3 minutes, but I promise not long, which is a big lie. You know, I spent a lot of my life, about 12 years of it, as a pastor. Are you guys here okay?
No.
You're not here? I don't think so. Where's the control of this? Gauge off. All right. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Great.
I once spoke in a big room. It was at a convention. There we go. And I was speaking at the convention, and I kept seeing people in the back doing like this. And I finally asked one of the dumbest questions I've ever asked in my life. I said, "Can you folks in the back hear okay?" The guy piped up and says, "No, sir, and we sure appreciate it, too." So I've decided never to ask that again. Now, are we hearing or not? We're not. Okay. Is there another mic? Okay, let's try this. Which one? This center one? Yeah, no. How about this?
Yeah.
Had me worried there for a minute. I thought, you know, this is reminding me of the days back in Arkansas when I was like the only Republican running for anything. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. I grew up in a very Democratic town. There were only 7 Republicans in the entire county. All 7 had moved in from somewhere else. There were no Republicans in Hempstead County, Arkansas, where I grew up, except those 7. They'd all moved in. The only other ones were the ones who'd been messed with at some point later on in life. We used to say that the 3 greatest heroes growing up in the South, at least where I came from, were Jesus, Elvis, and FDR, not necessarily in that order. And I'm from a family that was so hardcore Democrat, because everybody was, that I'm not sure that my parents even voted for me most of the time. I think they finally did come around late in my political career. But I was saying earlier that I spent about 12 years as a pastor in a Baptist church. And, you know, as a result of that, I would go to some place, I says, "Folks, don't worry. I realize the hour is late and I'll be brief." And I realized nobody believed that. Number one, having been a pastor and a politician, they believed 2 things were absolutely certain. 1, I was going to talk a while. And 2, I was going to ask for money. So will the ushers come forward now? We'll get that out of the way. I really do want to say thank you very much for coming, and what a pleasure to be in Union County tonight. It is an honor and a joy and a thrill to see this room filled up. I think one of the great things that's happened in America is what's happening in North Carolina. And the amazing changes that are happening in your state because you have a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, and it is scaring the daylights out of liberals, not just in North Carolina, but all over the country, who's wondering what happened to North Carolina. And I think the great thing is that with the courage of your legislature and governor and the kind of good people that you've sent to Congress, what you're saying is, I'll tell you what's going on in North Carolina. We have decided that lower taxes are better than higher taxes and will bring more business, more jobs, and better paying jobs to the people who live here. That's one thing you're saying. I think you're saying that less government regulation and meddling in the middle of trying to run a business is far better than having the government second guess every decision a person makes, wanting to regulate everything from a mud puddle to a piece of machinery. I think people are beginning to recognize that what's happening in North Carolina is that there is a real sense in which the values of the majority of people in this state are finally now getting legislated so that the life of an unborn child is considered precious, priceless, and worthy of its protection. I cannot believe that we would live in a culture
where we would think that it is okay to devalue one human being below another. That somehow we would think that some people are more valuable than others. That some are worth protecting and providing for, and while others are expendable, even disposable. And the culture that has so permeated today's liberal mindset is that people are disposable and expendable. We spend more time protecting dolphins and puppies than we do unborn children. And folks, there's something horribly wrong about a culture in which we say, with true and I think genuine disgust, that the gassing of 400 children in Syria and the killing of 1,400 through chemical weapons is a horror. But how can we be utterly self-righteous when 1.5 million babies in our own country never breathe a breath of air? Every year. And for those who thought that the Republican Party died in 2012 just because we didn't win the presidential race, let me assure you, I think there's never been a better time to be a Republican. And after watching this current administration completely bungle its way through the crisis in the Middle East, I'm convinced that there are a lot of Democrats who now go to work with paper sacks over their head because they don't want their friends to know how they actually voted. Folks, I've never seen anything like this. The president goes out, first says, I can go to war without Congress. Then when he realizes that Congress isn't with him because the American people aren't with him, he says, I think I'll go and ask Congress. Now, lest you think he was doing that because he suddenly read the Constitution and found out there was another branch of government other than his. The reason was that he knew if he could get to Congress and get Congress to give its approval, and things didn't turn out well, he would be able to blame Congress.
That's right.
Well, thankfully, the members of Congress, including two of yours who are here tonight, Richard Hudson and Robert Pittenger, are apparently smarter than the president because they weren't going to go and vote for something that they knew that their constituents had not sent them there to vote for. And not only that, but Democrats weren't going to vote for it. And so that wasn't going to work. He realized he was in a real pickle. So John Kerry in London answers a reporter's question, and he says something that even his own State Department immediately started walking back and claiming was really just a rhetorical statement, which is a nice way of saying it was a gaffe. Well, within hours, the Russian president, I call him the Reverend Vladimir Putin, because I was stunned that in his New York Times editorial, which I don't know if you had a chance to read, but I thought how fitting that he would be in the New York Times. I mean, I guess they've run out of old communists to write for them, so they And in Putin's article, this was amazing. The last line, he says, as we pray for God's blessings, and thank God we're all equal. And I'm thinking, this is a former KGB commie. I'm pretty sure that he didn't get on his knees every night and ask God to help him as he slaughtered all the enemies of communism during his reign as a communist during the old Soviet Union. And the very fact that he put those invocations of God in his editorial, I thought, well, praise the Lord and pass the vodka. I guess old Vladimir has become a reverend after all. So the Reverend Vladimir Putin immediately jumped on John Kerry's statement and said, oh, Syria give up all its chemical weapons? We'll see if we can make that happen. And a few hours after that, the Syrian president, the butcher of Damascus, agreed in principle that he would. So the president already has his speech scheduled. He wasn't going to reschedule it because he had a golf game the next day. He couldn't reschedule it. So he goes ahead and gives his speech, and with a straight face and standing flat-footed before the American people, while interrupting a wonderful rerun of Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. He stands and tells the American people that this really was his plan all along and that he had talked to Putin about it a few weeks earlier. Can I tell you something? If you believe that, chances are you will believe that I was the one who inspired John F. Kennedy to say in 1961 that we would send a man to the moon within the decade. Yes, I did that. I was only 5 years old, but I did that. I'm telling you now. Now, I'm laughing about it only to keep from crying. Because I tell you, our country, its reputation, has been irreparably damaged by a president who treats our friends like enemies and our enemies like friends. And when that happens, our enemies are still our enemies. And now our friends have become our enemies as well. If there ever was a time that we need to stand for those forces of freedom and liberty and democracy across the world, it is now. We have a true ally in the Middle East. It desperately needs the world to know that it will not stand alone if it is attacked. The world needs to know that it will have a solid ally in the United States should anybody threaten its existence. And we need to let the world know that Israel is not our enemy, not just our interest, but that they are our friend, and that if the Iranians have any intention of developing a nuclear device and using it to annihilate Israel like they have said that they will do, they need to know that the wrath of Almighty God as well as Almighty America will come upon them like a size 15 boot on a cockroach. They need to understand that is not going to happen. But I'm not sure that anybody in the world right now knows what our message and policy is, because the people who are making it seem not to know what it is. And that's why, rather than being discouraged about our party in the future, I'm encouraged. Not by the world events, not by an economy in which more people in America have given up on the job market than ever before. Not because we have had the longest sustained unemployment rate in the history of keeping records of employment. Those are not the encouraging signs. The encouraging signs are that I think that an increasing number of American people are going to wake up with just a little bit of common sense and realize that you cannot build a strong economy when you punish productivity and you reward irresponsibility. Now, folks, I have come to that wonderful place in life where all my kids are grown, they're all out of college, they're all out on their own. It is the sweet time of life. I've told many young parents, two greatest days of your life as a parent. Number one, the day the kid is born. And number two is the day that the kid finally gets out of school and gets off your payroll and on somebody else's payroll. That is a sweet day. But I'm there. My kids are grown, two of them are married and have children, which means I've got grandkids. And I wish I had them to show you on the screen for the next several hours, but I won't. But I can now say that I know a little bit about raising children. When all of our kids finally left the nest, we've always had dogs, but we had a dog, and then we had another, and then we got another. And until our lab, who at age 15 died this past January, we had 3 dogs, and we had them for several years. Now, the kids swore up and down that we had replaced them with the dogs. And they said, you know, this is very obvious that we've left 3 kids, all gone, you get 3 dogs. And they were really unhappy. They said, because you treat those dogs better than you treat us. To which I said, those dogs behave better than you ever did. But I'm going to just tell you, I learned a few things about raising kids and training dogs, and if you've done either one, I bet you know this is true. If there is a behavior that you want more of, you reward it. And if there is a behavior you want less of, you consequence it. Consequence is the politically correct way of saying you bust their backside. Now, I know that it's not appropriate to even talk in those terms, but I grew up in a generation raised by those of the greatest generation who were very patriotic Americans. And my father was the most patriotic man you've ever met. He laid on the stripes, I saw stars. It was old-fashioned patriotism. So I'm just hoping that you get the visual image of consequence here. But the fact is, you know that if there's a behavior you want more of, reward it, right? If you want less of it, consequence it. And it works for kids and it works for dogs. What do we do in our economy today? If there is a behavior that we should want, it's more people working, people investing, people saving, people putting aside for the future, for themselves and for future generations, right? So what do we do with people who work? We punish them by a tax rate that goes up with the harder they work. So we're penalizing productivity. The more productive you are, not only the more money that you will pay, the higher rate that you will pay, which means we punish you for being better than mediocre. If you save, we punish you by taxing the savings. If you invest and it works out, we punish you by taxing the investment income. If you buy something and you sell it as a profit, which is the point of buying something and selling it last time I checked, it isn't to say, man, I bought this for $1 and I sold it for 50 cents. I'm going to have to sell a lot of these to get my $1 back. Folks, that's the way it works. So why do we punish something that we ought to want people to do? And as far as punishing people for leaving an inheritance for their kids, isn't that better than leaving a bunch of bills that the rest of the neighbors have to pick up and pay? But think about what we do. We punish the behavior that we say we need more of, and then we reward the behavior that is least productive. So it doesn't matter whether it's some great big bank or insurance company in New York. The government has decided that they're too big to fail and we go bail them out. And by the way, a message to the Republicans who thought it was perfectly okay to bail out Wall Street but have a problem helping some single mom put food on her table. Let's be consistent about it. I don't mind helping some single mom put food on her table, making sure that her kids get an education, but I got a real problem when we as a country bail out a bunch of highly educated Ivy Leaguers who ran their companies in the ground and got big bonuses for it. And folks, as Republicans, let's be as clear as we can be to the rest of America. We don't think that's right, and we don't believe that you ought to reward reckless, irresponsible behavior. So I think we've got a great opportunity, not to sit around and moan about elections we've lost, but to rather look toward the future and realize that this is a great time to be a Republican and a great time to embrace a conservative message and to say that you can't spend money you don't have, you can't borrow money that you can't afford to pay back, and that we'd like to bring some fiscal responsibility and fiscal sanity to this country. And we'd like to take the strong stand that some things are always right and some things are always wrong, and that we unapologetically believe that every life has value and purpose. And we do not in any way run away from our embrace of the dignity and worth of each human being. And in fact, we will proclaim that every person is worthy of our protection and that no person is expendable or somehow disposable. If we take that message to America, we will see even more people elected by common sense Americans. Let's make 2014 the year that we get our numbers in the House up, that we take the Senate, we keep getting Republicans elected to the state legislature and to governorships, and prepare ourselves to get a Republican president in 2016, and we'll get our country back on track, get this world back on track, and the sound of our trumpet will surely sound, a certain sound, rather than the bungled tune that it sounds today. Let's make that happen, and thank you very much for letting me be with you here in North Carolina.